bootleg toys. Call them bootlegs, call them knockoffs, call them fakes. They're part of the toy industry. And, well, they're weird. But they're also kind of funny. And they've kind of taken on a life of their own, especially in the last 20 years or so. Where do bootleg toys come from, and what's the story behind them? I mean, they're clearly illegal, right? And how is it that bootleg toys have become kind of an industry into themselves, and there are actually people who collect and purposely make bootleg looking toys? Well, I've been asked on my channel by a couple different viewers in the comments, including TJMB as well as Christoph Matthews, to answer some questions about bootlegs and what are they and where do they come from. So that's what we're doing today on Spector Creative. I'm your host, Toy Guru Neitlich. Toy Guru Neitlich? Did I forget my first name? Scott. That's my first name. I always forget the important part. Well, anyway, you know who I am. This is my channel. I've been in the toy industry, and we're talking about bootlegs. Bootleg toys are, they're obviously illegal. I mean, look at this pack here. You know, you've got superheroes from different IPs mixed together, different scales. You know, clearly everyone has fond memories of playing with My Little Horse, right? I mean, you know, I loved playing with My Little Horse when I was a little girl. Who am I kidding? I never played with My Little Horse, even when I was a little girl. What about the incredible fella from the smash hit movie Revengers Endless Tussle? Oh, that sounds more like it. Yeah, I don't seem to remember playing with that either. But I definitely remember the moment in Frozen when Elsa mech'd out and became a giant transformer in order to defend Arendelle from invaders from beyond the stars. It's too bad Hasbro didn't actually make toys based on this, because that would have been really cool. Well, bootlegs are here to stay, and there's a few different ways to approach them. Because not all bootlegs fall into the same category, into the same bucket. They can range all the way from the highly illegal to product that's actually considered pop art, as well as items that are just arts and crafts. So let's look at a few examples. First stop, we have to go to Etsy. So Etsy is notorious for being a site where people sell homemade gear and items, and sometimes these items are, well, I guess they should be licensed, but they're not. And as cool as they are, they often get away with what they do because they put characters on different, I guess you could say, categories that aren't really available at mass retail. Although it kind of does, tread the line, I suppose, in some areas. I mean, if you type in Spider-Man, you're going to get page after page after page of all sorts of Spider-Man items. And sometimes because they can be customized, like making, your child's name with Spider-Man on it, they can kind of get away with it. Other times, toys are more made as, well, I'm not going to call this one an art piece, but it's like, a humorous piece to complement an existing collection, and it's something that a toy company is probably never going to do. Something that's maybe more of an adult take, or in this case, kind of an undead take on Star Wars. So a lot of people who work on Etsy use something called the first sale doctrine, but they're not really using it correctly. The first sale doctrine is basically a law that says that you have the right to sell an item that you ideally bought or made, and you can sell kind of one of them first. Like if you went out and bought a toy and then wanted to resell it on eBay. That's what it really means. Etsy tends to look at it as inspired by, and they tend to hang their hat on that, even though there's really no law that really protects products that are inspired. So if you were going to make a product inspired by Thor, you really can't make him look like this, because this version of Thor is copyrighted to Marvel Studios and, likeness rights with Chris Hemsworth. And you're not going to be able to produce that. But, maybe there's some wiggle room, because technically Thor is in public domain because he is a Norse god, and if you tweaked it a little bit, You might be able to get away with doing Thor in the sense that you are not doing a Marvel version of Thor, you are doing the the Norse god version of Thor, which, is wonky because what elements make Thor the Marvel Thor and which elements make Thor the public domain Thor? Well, it's illegal. It's obviously illegal to make product without getting a license for it and selling it for profit. And that's what bootlegs are all about. They're basically illegally making product without getting a license. And while some people might say, well, it's not illegal if you don't get caught, and that's a bit part of it, well, it's part of it in the sense that sometimes when you see things like this at swap meets and outdoor markets, the reason that they can make these is because they're done in very quick runs and the factories close before authorities can honestly get there. Or it's also because going after the factories that are pumping things like this out, is it really worth the IP owner's time and the toy company or the studio's time to go chase down these vendors, these factories overseas producing this stuff? There's a phrase called, is the juice worth the squeeze? It was actually used a lot by one of my bosses at Mattel all the time, talking about whether we should take on a project. Is it, is the outcome going to be worth the energy you put into it? And going after some of these factories, questionable it's worth the time. Another area of bootlegs to look at are pop culture bootlegs. So this is Sucklord. And it's his name. He made up that name. Kind of like I'm Toy Guru. We both, made up our own nicknames and they just kind of stuck. Well, Sucklord here, and that's a, compliment to him, he makes pop culture bootleg toys. So it started with a line called Suckle, which was kind of a spoof of the Muscle product, and he would put it on Kickstarter, and if enough people interested, he would make it. And this kind of mushroomed into a whole line of product where he continued to make figures, a lot of times in that sort of muscle-inspired pink, and he would sell them at conventions and online, etc., and he would sell them not just as pop culture items, but they fell under parody or satire, much as Robot Chicken is able to make sketches making fun of things like Star Wars or He-Man or G.I. Joe. They do so under the parody and satire clause of different laws in different states. When you're making fun of something and you're doing it in a, call it a harmless way, really for the sake of humor, that does give you some clause. However, when you start selling it, there's a little bit of questionable, ethics and morality there because you're now making a profit off of something. But satire and humor laws do protect you in some aspects. I mean, again, Robot Chicken obviously makes money. They sell commercial time. So when you're making something that is designed for satire, you can kind of get away with it. When there's no satire involved and you're directly making toys that basically look like they should have a license, like Smithlord Creations here, well, that opens up a whole other door. So Smithlord Creations designs retro-looking Star Wars figures as if they were part of the original 1980s or 1970s toy line, right down to the card art and blisters and the whole 9 yards. And these were great, and they look great. They look physically, like pieces of art, if you will. But now that especially Hasbro is making their own toys based on the original vintage line, they call them the Retro Collection, not to be confused with the Vintage Collection. Yeah, there's like so many names. I don't even know what to call the original toys anymore. But especially because Hasbro / Kenner through Hasbro are making figures like Grand Moff Tarkin here, who were never in the original vintage line. Well, this is exactly what Smith Toys makes, or what they were putting out was unmade or unproduced characters looking like they were part of the vintage line. So when they put things out this, you might say, whoa, wait a minute, Hasbro is going to shut you down, or Lucasfilm, Disney, is going to shut you down in an instant. Well, why don't they? Well, this is why. Have you noticed the price point? They're selling a group of figures for $500. The reason that toy companies and IP owners, studios, etc., don't go after companies like this is, while the toys look great and they're clearly not parody, they're not protected like under those type of laws and clauses, they don't go after them because, well, they're considered part of the craft industry, meaning it's something that's obviously homemade, it's not mass produced, and above all, it's sold at a very, very high premium because it's handmade. So this bantha, which it looks awesome, and props to them for making it, is $260. Hasbro would never sell a bantha like this at this price point. So yeah, it's like, again, juice worth the squeeze or squeeze worth the juice. This is considered a craft product. It's homemade. It's quote unquote sort of one of a kind, or, you can obviously make a few of them sitting down, but you're not mass producing them. And that's basically why you don't see them getting shut down. But another way that bootlegs are actually shut down is when they go after the brand itself. So who doesn't love a good Bernie doll? Well, Barbie doll. So this is a whole other area of bootlegs. You're not just producing toys that are either spoofing product, satire, or part of the craft industry, but producing product that is actually viewed by the IP holder as harming the brand. And let's face it, Barbie has lawyers. She's got a whole bunch of lawyers. And Barbie's maker, Mattel, has been notorious for going to court to defend Barbie as a brand, not necessarily as a bootleg toy, but any item that uses Barbie's likeness or even starts to encroach on her play pattern. And because, it's in Mattel's interest to be, well, queen of the dolls or king of the dolls. For example, when the Barbie Girl song came out from Aqua. Everyone remember that song? I'm not even going to try to sing it here. But, Mattel went after them because while it was viewed by the band as satire and parody, it was viewed as brand infringement by Mattel. And there was a long court battle over this. And although what's kind of ironic is that at the end of the day, after a whole court battle going after something that was satire, Mattel wound up purchasing the song and then using it in Barbie advertising. So, some things come full circle. It's kind of crazy out there. But it's not just bootleg toys. Mattel, as, owner of Barbie, will come after websites using Barbie trademarks, not just product. They've even gone after adult entertainers that have used the Barbie name as part of their act. And they've won some of these lawsuits because the name is part of a big brand. They also went after a Vermont clothing store called Barbie's Lingerie because the woman who ran it, her name was Barbie, and she made lingerie and sold it. And Mattel actually won that because Mattel makes Barbie lingerie, and the store was, in their mind, infringing on Barbie's copyright and was also considered, a sort of a bootleg Barbie product because it was not official, even though it was made for humans, not dolls. So, there's no one answer to bootlegs. There is no one category that they fall under. The ones that we see at swap meets that have weird names that, mix up IP in the same package, well, toy companies do go after, factories that make these, but it's kind of like every time you shut one factory down, another one pops up. And, again, going back to is the juice worth the squeeze, it's tough because you're constantly chasing these factories down to prevent them from making Spider-Man action figures, and you shut one factory down and, two more pop up. There's just too much of a market for extremely cheap knockoff product because it can be sold so inexpensive, especially in poorer countries around the world. And while companies can eventually catch up to the manufacturers or the IP owners, and they will shut down companies doing things like this. This is a figure using He-Man parts, not even called He-Man, but using Mattel-owned or at one point licensed molds. But Mattel will find those companies. Hasbro, Spin Master, Jax. I'm definitely not picking on Mattel in this video. I was just using Barbie as an extended example. But all the toy companies do this. They will close down factories, but it's tough because is it worth their time and all of their legal bills to do this? And then as far as seeing things that are part of the craft industry, well, it's really the price point that keeps them out of it. They're really not interested in shutting someone down that's selling a product for such a high price point, especially when it kind of actually helps the brand. I mean, this is going to go to collectors who will enjoy it, who will then probably buy more Hasbro product to complement their craft product. So they tend to view these as, while illegal, at the end, because of the price point and because they're handmade, and that's the key, they're not being mass produced. The toy company will say, well, it helps the overall brand. It's only adding to people's collections, and this is just something that people are making and selling because they're doing it in their craft room, or upstairs in their spare bedroom, or their attic, or their dungeon, and they're not going to go shut down people unless they start really mass producing them to the point that they can sell them at a price point equivalent to what's at retail. But when a brand is bootlegged, not just on product, but there's actually infringements on the equity of a brand, that is when you're going to see companies lawyer up and stop any harm to brand integrity. So it's less about product bootlegs and more about brand bootlegs that really get companies into court and actually wanting to do something to maintain the essence of their brand, less so cheap versions of their product. There's also the parody clause, of course, and a lot of bootleggers will use this to make pop culture art, and it's got a life on its own too, because there are people who collect it just because it's kitsch and neat. I hope you enjoyed this video about all sorts of fake toys. If you want to see more like this, please do subscribe and give it a like, because that tells YouTube to share it with other people. Any other topics, leave them below and leave comments and I'll answer them. Hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.